let's continue. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here and your patience. So now we have the great pleasure to bring directly from India, from New Delhi, Dr. Rina Ramdev. She's an associate professor in the Department of English at Delhi University. Let's see if I pronounce well.
That's okay. That much is enough.
Her, okay. And so she's an AHRC fellow, a Center for Law, Gender, Sexuality, Universities of Westminster and Kent, UK, and also British Council. She served as a Secretary of India Association of the Commonwealth, Literature and Language Studies. She has worked on the politics of post-coloniality, the writings of Arundhati Roy, and the relationship between literature and social movements. She's interested and involved in exploring the intersections of academic practice and political resistance within university spaces. Her recent works include many recent works. Yeah, she's working in she's collaborated and she's given many lectures in India and abroad. So it's a great honor to have you here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Rina.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Sienna, for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be here. I did an online lecture the last year, but it's just joyless. I don't like this online mode at all, and I'm very happy to be here with students. Very quickly, I just want to tell you people what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about graphic novels. I don't know if you read graphic novels.
Comics or
graphic comics. But there's something very different about this particular graphic novel because it's the story of B.R. Ambedkar. B.R. Ambedkar was one of the drafters of India's constitution. But more than that, he was from a caste that, the upper caste practiced untouchability against. So, he's a very important man in India's history. And this particular graphic novel, it's called Bhimayana, and it's a story of Ambedkar. What is interesting about the graphic novel is that it's the graphic is made by tribals. The two artists who have drawn the graphics for this novel are from the Gond community. The Gond community, the Gond tribal community. They're tribal artists. The tribals are also called Adivasis in India. So it's very interesting that on the one hand, so these are two groups that experience marginalization in India, because one is a caste group and the other is the tribal group. And they are, the kind of discrimination, disprivilege, etc., that they face in India. It's very interesting that there should be this kind of collaboration between these two groups. Of course, Ambedkar, he died. It's not as if he's alive. The Gond artists are, of course, taking on the task of representing his life. And this is a graphic novel, which is. I might need to go there. Actually.
Yeah, you need to. Yeah.
To just go through the slides and just keep showing it to you guys as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So just before I start, I just want to show you the cover of the graphic novel. I had shared it with Sienna. This is what it's called. It's called Bhimai. And as you can see, that's the kind of artwork that I will be looking at today. And you can see it's sort of, it's got dots and it's got those dashes. It's very different from regular sepia tinted, sort of graphic novels that you would read, because those use brown or black and white. This is very, very colorful. I can just quickly show you some other pages before we move. And so this is another page from the graphic novel. And it's very colorful. This is folk art. This is folk art in the novel. So what is it that I'm trying to say today? What I'm trying to say is that when these artists are using the graphic medium for the story of Ambedkar and his struggle against untouchability, it's a very interesting coming together of two very different groups who have different experiences of marginalization. So they come from a kind of disenfranchised group. They come from groups that are, kept outside of the mainstream. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about today. So what is created then through the Bhimayan, the title of the graphic novel is Bhimayan. I don't know if you people have heard of the Ramayan. The Ramayan is one of the sort of holy books. It's an epic. It's an epic that that's revered by the Hindus in India. And because this is the story of Ambedkar, it's called Bhimayan. His first name was Bhim Rao. So therefore it's called Bhimayan, but it's also very cleverly, it's playing against the idea of Ramayan, God, because Ramayan has God, Lord Ram as its hero. Here is an untouchable who's also the hero. He's the hero of the Bhimayan. So just like the Ramayan, this is called the Bhimayan. So it's taken from Ambedkar's autobiographical notes. The novel, takes an extract from that. And this is Ambedkar, this is what he talks about, the experience of untouchability, as you can read here. He says, under the rule of the Peshwas in the Maratha country, the untouchable was not allowed to use the public street if a Hindu was coming along, lest he pollute the Hindu by his shadow. The untouchable was required to wear a black thread either on his wrist or on his neck as a sign or a mark to prevent the Hindu from getting them polluted by his touch through a mistake. So these are the kind of struggles that he talks about, and that's what the graphic novel is sort of including. I'm just going to not read it in entirety because I'd rather explain it to you. You can read it as we go along. The publisher of the Bhimayan is Navyana, and S. Anand is the name of the publisher, and that's what he says. He says in India, today, as in the rest of the world, very few people know about Ambedkar. I mean, everybody would have heard of Mahatma Gandhi. They might have even heard of Nehru, but Ambedkar is not a name that has got the same kind of due attention that he should have. Outside the Dalit movement. Now, Dalit is the category. Dalit is the term that is used now by the community. Although the word Dalit means downtrodden, it means like mud, but this is a reclaiming of that word, that that's the way you treated us, so it's okay, we're going to call ourselves that. So the word Dalit is used by the community as a show of reclaiming power. As against, say, the African Americans, there's a certain word that we no longer use for a race of African Americans, but here the word Dalit is very politically used. As against Gandhi, worked with the community of untouchables, and he had given them the name Harijan. Harijan means children of God. But the community said, we don't want those names. We don't want you to call us children of God. Why don't we want you to call us children of God? Because on the one hand, thank you, on the one hand, you call us Harijan, you call us children of God, and yet you continue to practice untouchability. You don't want to touch us. You don't even want our shadow to fall on you. So, just your ideas are absolutely crap. We don't want to be called Harijan. We don't want to be called children of God, that kind of patronizing, that kind of condescension. So the word Dalit, although it means, like I said, it means something that's downtrodden, something that you step upon, that becomes a political use of the term for the community. So he says that S. Anand, who's the publisher, he says that he wants to bring to the world the story of Ambedkar. And that's why he brought out Bhimayan. So now the question is, how does the tribal ecology of the artists who sort of sketched the Bhimayan are tribals, they are Adivasis. How do the two meet? On the one hand, the Dalit community, and on the other hand, the tribals. How is there a coming together of the two? And so the tribal democratic communal ethos provides a more habitable space for imagining the annihilation of caste. The annihilation of caste is also the title of Ambedkar's very important work. Than the realist modernist ethic in which political struggle is articulated in the language of colonial masters. So there's a kind of limiting, there's a self-limiting in the language or the art that sort of is inherited from the British in India. And so that wouldn't have been enough. It would have sort of missed the point, it would have missed the mark. And therefore, critics have said that this works very well. This kind of tribal art works very well to talk about a different kind of, struggle. It works very well, that the two come together very well. Okay. So this is something that we'll talk about later. I just want to move to the next. Okay, so there's a wonderful song. Sienna, do you think this video can play? It's on Vimeo.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, give it a try. Bueno, I hope.
Yeah, you can just sign in.
Dice que no está is not calificado.
Yeah, you can sign in. Just.
Do you have a?
Yeah, but the password is saved here. I don't know.
¿Alguien tiene cuenta con Vimeo?
Okay, doesn't matter. I'll leave this. It's okay.
No,
it's okay. Where is it?
Oh.
Yeah, no, doesn't matter. I just wanted you to hear a song. It's it's a tribal song, and they talk about, so the tribals are still, as I said, kept out of the mainstream, and how they have a very close relationship with Jal, Jungle, Zameen, which means water, the earth, and the sky. Okay, so water, the earth, and the sky. Jal, jungle, no, sorry, the forest, the earth, and water. So this is about, and you know, I mean, because these are communities that didn't have documentation about their ownership. I mean, these are people who lived outside society in a way. They didn't have anything to authenticate that they are the owners of the land. So it became very easy initially for the Britishers to take over their land, and now, of course, the capitalists who are, taking over because these are the areas where the tribals live are very, very rich in natural resources. So all the big multinationals have now sort of swooped in and have come and attempted to take over their land. So that's a wonderful song. I'll leave the link with Shiana, and at some point, perhaps you can, hear the song. Okay, so who are the Adivasis? In the first place, it's important for us to understand who the Adivasis are. Adivasi translates as the original inhabitants. So nowadays, they're also called First Nations, right? I mean, whether it is the Indians in the United States or the Aborigines in Australia, they're now called the First Nations. So the Adivasis are the First Nations in India, and yet they are stripped of all power. They don't have the same kind of ownership of their land because, like I said, they were not educated the way mainstream India was educated. So they don't have any kind of documentation to prove that where we live, where we farm, where we, where we have our communities, that is ours. They are groups of indigenous people, First Nations, living across different parts of India. The Adivasis are racially and culturally diverse and linguistically belong to 4 language families. During the British rule, the colonial government's attempt to take over forested areas resulted in violent clashes with the Adivasis, who were unable to furnish legal documented claims. All right. So now, the next, while all this was happening in India's political history, already a branch of Orientalism in Europe had emerged in the form of anthropology. This is something that we're all familiar with, at least in the third world. Perhaps more appropriately, savageology, because I don't know if you've read or heard about Edward Said's very important work, Orientalism. Yeah. So that in a way is savageology. Why is it called savageology? Because it creates the whole idea of the other, the savage other, the non-European other. So the non-European other is always less than, is always primitive, is always savage, whereas the European is cultured, the European is, comes from European Enlightenment. It's, all those ideas of progressive ideas in a way. So already a branch of Orientalism in Europe had emerged in the form of anthropology, perhaps more appropriately, savageology. Some of the attributes discussed in savageology were applied to the Indian tribes, and tribes came to be seen as necessarily primitive. By the end of the 19th century, the concept of tribe and the notion of criminal tribes had received acceptance even among the educated Indians. And this is true even now, even today. Some tribes are called denotified. I mean, they're sort of denotified tribes. And even today in India, there are, sometimes when there's sort of people's houses get burgled or cars are broken into, then the police often comes out with this narrative that it is the Pardi tribe, or, there are different names of tribes that they ascribe it to. Oh, it's that tribe has come to create trouble. So there is an entire sort of legacy that is forced onto these tribes, that these tribes are, social, they're social outcasts. Not only are they social outcasts, but they are they are sort of a social menace. Okay, so the tribes are still forced to carry that legacy that had been created by the British. The British created it very interestingly because the land that was occupied by the tribals was very important land for the British, for their navy, because that was where a lot of the timber came from. So they tried to throw out the tribals, but when the tribals resisted, then they tried to impose a tax on them. And of course, the Adivasis were not going to pay tax. They were like, this is our land, why should we have to pay tax? And then they were declared criminal tribes. And that idea of criminality is sort of, continues even today. Then, so there's a very important writer called G.N. Davy. He was actually a literature professor. He continues to write and work with the Adivasis. He left the university and he's done some very, very important work on the Adivasis. And he set up the Adivasi Academy in Gujarat. And look at what he says. He says it's almost impossible to characterize all of India's tribals in a single ethnographic or historical framework. And he's done a lot of, as I said, you can read it, he's done a lot of very important work with the Adivasis. He says in contemporary practice, the tribal memory is greatly undermined. There is a general insistence that tribal children attend schools where non-tribal children attend school, that they use medicines manufactured for others, and that they adopt common agricultural practices. So what is the point of all this? Is that this kind of forced mainstreaming. You force them into the mainstream, that all the stuff that you practice is primitive, all the stuff that you practice, now there's COVID-19 happening, you have to get yourselves vaccinated. And even if the Adivasis are saying, no, we have our own system of remedies, or we have our own system of medicine, which might not be understandable and acceptable to you, but that's something that we want to stay with. Then the state will turn around and tell them, okay, then if you fall ill, then don't come to our, I'm simplifying it, but you know what I mean. Oh, yeah. Then don't come to us, kind of a thing. So that forced mainstreaming of the tribals. Now, this is again very interesting because on the one hand, the state wants the Adivasis to become a part, because the Adivasis are seen as extensions of majority Hindus in India. And so there is, they are seen as part of the larger Hindu society, as against the Dalits. The Dalits are part of Hindu society, and yet because of the practice of untouchability, the Dalits are kept out. So the Dalits, who are already a part of Hindu society, are kept out because of untouchability, as against the tribals who practice a completely different religion, nature, pantheistic. There is an attempt to bring them into the mainstream. So it's a very interesting contradiction. Keep the Dalits out, bring the Adivasis in. Why keep the Dalits out? Because of all these ideas about purity and pollution. The polluted body. Yours is the polluted body. Your shadow cannot fall on me. I cannot drink water from the same well, not even the same glass. The same well. You can't drink water from the same well. So all these sort of very discriminatory practices are still continuing. This is Navjot Altaf Mohammadi, who's done a lot of work again with the with ideas of sustainability, Anthropocene, etc. And he says it's difficult to understand within the commonly accepted Western notions of ownership or property the Adivasi, and this is important, the Adivasi's relationship to land, forest, animals, and water, as it is rooted in very different conceptual frameworks. They have associations with nature that explain how the natural world offers an insight into the maintenance of being. Belief in both interconnectedness and interdependence has been part of the wisdom of these peoples for centuries. Okay, and the culture, symbols, and ritualistic practices of the Adivasis have emerged over centuries as part of their belief in the integration and nurturing of all living beings and the cyclical processes of nature. Now, this is again something that the Adivasis believe. If humans do not cooperate and respect the environment and their relationship with the soil, their existence will be in danger. And this is Navjot Altaf Mohammadi. He says, I see this as a process of communication and listening, being mobile with the possibilities of exposing oneself and exploring all the way around a continual self-transformation. All right, but again, because the Adivasi is sort of confined within a discourse of the primitive, the uncultured, that these are things that are ignored. The hazardous damage to the natural environment is endangering the history, cultural heritage, and creative spirit, as well as the perception of culture locally, in which both sensorial experience and philosophical reflection have been part of their being. Quoting the people with whom he has been engaged in the mining areas, who say, mining may be an economic development for industry, but not for our soil and soul. So, you bring in your factories, you bring in your industries, you bring in your capitalist profit. But for us, this is our God, this is our mother, this is our life. You cannot profit from it. You cannot profit from something that we sort of revere as family. The local people think it is the end of life, as their relationship to the land, as I mentioned above, centers around a belief in nature's cyclical processes. Then there's another independent researcher called C.R. Bijoy, and he's also worked extensively on the Adivasis. He says, the official and popular perception of Adivasis is merely that of isolation in forest, tribal dialect, animism, primitive occupation, carnivorous diet, naked or semi-naked nomadic habits, love, drink, and dance. So there's again this kind of savage, a stereotyping of the Adivasi as savage, almost animal-like, that, all they like to do is dance, they drink, there's free sex. So that kind of stereotyping is sort of, it's very advantageously, mobilized by the state. Contrast this, and this is again interesting, with the self-perception of Adivasis. And they see themselves as casteless. They are casteless, classless, and egalitarian in nature. Community-based economic systems, symbiotic with nature, democratic according to the demands of the time, accommodative history, and people-oriented art and literature. So this is a very close relationship that they share with nature, as against mainstream India, which looks at them as I said, primitive, animal-like, savage, need to be trained, need to be cultured, need to be brought into the mainstream. Their children should go to our schools, not the kind of teaching that they're getting there. So there is that complete, binary that is created between the Adivasi and mainland India. Okay, this is a wonderful poem. Raman Ramanathan is a very well-known playwright from India. He's in Bombay, but he has a wonderful poem, and he's a friend, so I requested him if I could share it, and he was more than happy for me to share it. So he's talking about what happens to the tribal. So this, I'm sorry, it's very small. Ouch, sorry. I'll just read it. And who are you? Asked she in Gondi. Gondi is the language, the dialect. What do you want? She doesn't trust outsiders like me, who smile in Hindi and scowl in English. So that's the kind of culture that, people like myself, we have that, right? We come with a certain kind of arrogance of location that, we have education, we have a certain kind of, all the social capital that we come with. That night, the hills echoed a Dorli song about Jal, Jangal, Zameen. Jal is water, Jangal is forest, Zameen is the earth. A 1,000-year-old tune hummed by Veer Narayan Singh, one last time in 1837, until he was hung. He was hung by the British, again for resisting. Now those wounds in Gondi and Dorli, the two languages, want to be resurrected and tell the tale of precious oxes excellently extracted, extruded, of precious ores, excellently extracted, extruded, manufactured in international factories to create an amalgamation of alloys. So these are all the factories that are now profiting. Unfreedom, unreason, unrealities, offered at a special discount rate. Okay, so everything is for profit. And he signs off by saying, in bloody memory of 1,000,000 Adivasis who lost their lives because of the capitalist drive, because of the drive of the state, because of the drive of international organizations, multinationals, etc. Okay, so now coming to the Bhima, and this is the graphic novel that I'm sort of interested in talking about. So as I told you, that the artists who are responsible for the artwork, this artwork, they're tribals. And Bhimayan is the story of B.R. Ambedkar's struggle against caste violence, caste discrimination. The Goms are a tribal community from central India, and Bhimayan's graphic artists, the Vyams, the two, their husband and wife, Durgabai and Shyam, they're called the Vyams. Durgabai and Subhash belong to the Pardhan Gond subset of bardic priests and genealogists who in the 1980s grouped together with the principal aim of translating the community's ritual practices and performance into visual narrative art. The Vyams were approached by Anand and his team for a commissioned graphic telling of B.R. Ambedkar's Waiting for a Visa. Now, these guys had never, they didn't even know what a graphic novel was. And it's very interesting that Anand, the publisher, went to them with a bunch of graphic comics, with a bunch of graphic novels, you know, Joe Sacco, Satrapi, you know, all the big names of the graphic novel. He went with them and he said, you know, these are the books that I want you to sort of, you know, look into, and this is what I want. They looked at those books and they were really taken aback. So one of the first things, and of course, these were names that were not familiar to them at all. So they hadn't even heard of Ambedkar. Okay, so then when they started reading about Ambedkar, they were very, very moved, and they were able to make connections between the struggles that Ambedkar had, you know, sort of gone through in his life and the kind of struggle as tribals and Adivasis that they went through. But when they looked at the graphic novels, they said, this is not our art. I mean, this is not how we make art. It's also interesting that they, although we are calling it art, this is the kind of work that they do is what they do on their sort of, you know, walls, on their floors. This is the art that you see on their walls and their floors. It's a part of their everyday you know, sort of experience of living. So this is not a separate thing, you know, like I'm an artist. No, every house has a kind of self-expression through its art. And for them then to box it in, because I mean, if you read graphic novels, you know that there are panels, even in comics, right? The idea of panels, there's one panel, second panel, third panel. And they said that's a kind of boxing in, that creates a kind of claustrophobia. We are not used to that. Our art is open, much, because when they're drawing on the floor, when they're drawing on the walls, they don't have to go by squares. They don't have to. It's out in the open. So this is something that the publisher came to them with, saying, these are the great graphic novelists, and look at them, look at their art, and this is what I want you to do. And they said, no, this is we just don't relate to it. We don't understand it at all. So this was the first sort of encounter with that. The afterword to the Bhimayan draws attention to the struggle for equality that Gond Adivasi artists have faced in recent times. So, for instance, they were very poor. The two artists who were commissioned by the publisher, they were very poor. And in India, there's a you know, sort of marking through clothes, through the kind of clothes that you wear. So they were dressed as they are, villagers, you know, nothing fancy about their clothes. And when they tried to get into the office of the publisher, the landlady stopped them and said, you know, go away, you know, like you're beggars or something. So that kind of humiliation that they faced. And then, of course, when they started reading about Ambedkar, then again, they were, you know, it sort of opened their eyes to a different kind of, a completely different order of discrimination that was faced by a person of a caste group, untouchability, okay? So she says this in her, you know, she talks about this, as you can read. And she says it's important to mention here that the violence, and this is not what she says, but this is what I'm saying, and it's very important. It's important to mention here that the violence of discriminatory practices that caste engenders is of a different order, as instances shown in the Bhimayan. As a young schoolboy, Ambedkar is refused drinking water from the common drinking area in school. And this, along with several other episodes, like his inability to find accommodation because of his caste, are reminders of the ineradicability of caste, that you can be educated. He went to Columbia. He did his PhD from Columbia, and yet he faced discrimination. What caste are you? What caste are you? So the minute, you know, I mean, he used to wear a suit, like a Western suit, but there is that kind of instinct that, oh, what caste are you? And the minute they came to know his caste, he was not allowed to stay in any of the places. Okay, so these are the two artists, Durgabai and Sham. He says, Durgabai says, she says, I make paintings related to old time stories about water, the sun and the moon. So as I was saying, very sort of integrated, very symbiotic kind of relationship with nature that they have. These old time stories are folk tales that have been passed down orally over generation. They contain the essence of the Gondi way of life. The Pardhan community traditionally were musicians who propagated these stories in the form of songs. The most important facet of these stories is their connect with nature and how closely human life was interlinked with it. When seen from a climate preservation lens, these stories, which in turn have reproduced as paintings, hold the key to finding an India-specific solution to alleviate the ecological crisis headed our way. But of course, there's a problem with that, because what a conservative state, what a far right state can do is, sort of mobilize this as, we were talking about ethnocentrism now, the idea that, oh, India has all the answers. Oh, India is a superior civilization. So, it's an either or. So we are not Western. We are so, we have all the answers. We are a wonderful old ancient civilization. So that kind of romanticizing of India is the other extreme. So it's very important to keep that kind of a critical understanding that, you can't say no to the kind of, if you're talking about Western influences, you're talking about colonization, you're talking about all the ill effects of that, but you cannot then, sort of uncritically talk about India as the solution for the rest of the world, which is what, there's an attempt to do that. I was telling Sienna just before this that, during COVID-19, Sienna was showing me a cow on the road when we were passing, and she said, oh, that's your sacred animal, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. But now there's such a anger and irritation about, what the cow has become, because during the time of the COVID-19, things like cow urine and cow dung was used. I mean, people were bathing in it, people were drinking cow urine. So that's that extreme, sort of, yeah, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And on Amazon, you can, I don't know if it's available here through the India sort of thing, but on Amazon, they were selling cow dung, they were selling cow shit, because, I mean, this is something that was being propagated. So, which is why I'm saying it's very important, although I've sort of said this, that, the Indian solution, etc., but this is something that really needs to be, I think I should just remove it. I'm getting irritated with it even as I speak. Yeah. So it's there. Yeah. Please just delete it later. Okay. All right. Then, So what is it? What is the kind of artwork that they use? The Gonds. They use, it's very interesting that they use signature patterns. And where are these signature patterns coming from? A lot of it is, they have a signature style, as I said, in each of their homes. It'll be very specific. This is the signature pattern of this particular family. Artists are also inspired by symbols from day-to-day life. For example, a motif that represents dry, cracked earth, or the intricate and delicate patterns made by the cross-section of cut lemon. So basically, where is it that their art is inspired from? From everyday practices, from grain, from flowers, from everything. The tree is, again, very important. So these are all symbols that they use from everyday life, very, very integrated with nature. Okay, these are some of the pages from the Bhimai. It's a very readable novel. It's not a heavy novel. I really urge you people to look at it. And I wish I brought my copy of it. The art is beautiful. The art is just exquisite. In fact, there's another debate when we, because I mean, you're not students of literature, but in my literature class, we also talk about whether there is a kind of tension between the story of untouchability and the beauty of Adivasi art. Does this, does the beauty of Adivasi art negate in a way, the violence of caste discrimination that Ambedkar suffered. So, these are very interesting questions that we talk about in class. And like I said, the artwork is astounding. I mean, each page you can probably frame it because it's that kind of art. Okay. Okay. So this is what I was telling you, that when he took Anand, he took the works of Satrapi, Tezuka, Joe Sacco, and Durgabai and Subhash were really zapped, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, this is not what we can do." How could they do the artwork for a graphic narrative? And they say there were so many boxes. We did not know how to work in that pattern. That we can't be, I mean, it's like this. There's a box you fit your art in. They're like, how do we do that? We've never done that. That's not, I mean, they can't even say words like training, because for them it's not training. It's something that they do as, like I said, as an expression. And this is the, so then they said, they use the word khula. Khula means open. So they said, no, our artwork has to be khula. It has to be open. It cannot be boxed in. It cannot be something that you can trap in the traditional idea of the graphic novel. So this is, I mean, the graphic novel also has considerations of industry, profit, etc. So each page is expensive to bring out. So the artist and the publisher is not going to be happy about an image like this, where there's, most of it is empty. You have to fill it in. You have to fill it in. This is a waste of space. That's something that the artists are, that's not something that they're going to comply with, because that's an understanding that defeats their artistry. That's something that they say, no, our images cannot be boxed in. So there are many pages like this that are just one image, just one thing happening, as against the several panels that are there in the graphic novel. Okay, the panel format of, so khula, that's what I was telling you, it means openness. The panel format of most graphic novels is eschewed in favor of a much bolder, unfettered use of space on each page. So again, no panels here, as you can see. There are no panels. It's just, there's this sort of, open, sort of expression that is used for images. Okay, they use digna. The pattern is called digna. These are auspicious designs drawn on mud walls and floors of the homes to purify and protect for centuries. Digna art of the Pardangons is a traditional decorative art. Digna's arcane world of mythological animals, not real zoo animals. These are animals that they see and encounter every day. These are not domesticated animals. These are not like cultured animals that we see in the zoo. Digna originally served as ornamental border decorations, but here they move to the center of the page and turn into figures, and instead of just decorative art, they become trains, trees, animals, grazing birds. While the digna is brought to the center, the rest of the page is left empty. So you can understand a publisher feeling, oh my God, so much space is being wasted. I could have told an entire story, in sort of 5 pages. Look at the amount of waste that's happening here. All right. In the beginning, it was very difficult to adapt this story into a graphic novel, as the Vyams had never done sequential art. This is what Anand says, the publisher. And the Vyams in turn say, we'd like to state one thing very clear from the outset. We shall not force our characters into boxes. It stifles them. We prefer to mount our work in open spaces. Our art is khula, where there's space for all to breathe. Nandini Chandra, she's a wonderful academic from India. Now she's moved, unfortunately, to Hawaii. She's got some fabulous work on the graphic novel and on Bhimayan. She says the empty spaces are too conspicuous to do the unconscious work of gutter plans. As you know, the in-between space of the graphic novel is called the gutter. So here, again, the Bhimayan doesn't use the typical gutter. The gutter is the space between 2 panels. So this is also a gutter, just this thin line. If this is the one panel of a comic and this is one panel, this is still the gutter. Even if it's a sliver of a line, or sometimes it's big, it doesn't matter. But the gutter space is very, very important to the graphic mode, the idea of graphic storytelling. The graphics, as they come to be in the pages of the Bhimayan, are there in scattered arrangements that stretch and create elastic frames. The pages invite a synoptic viewing, and the artistic detailing is fantastically imagined, fantastically through the idea of fantasy, shunning the demands of realistic representation. Now again, G.N. Devi, who I've talked about previously, He says the tribal imagination is still to a large extent dreamlike and hallucinatory. It admits fusion between various planes of existence and levels of time in a natural and an artless manner. In tribal stories, oceans fly in the sky as birds, mountains swim in water as fish, animals speak as humans, and stars grow like plants. And this is very different from the Disneyfication that we see in, mainstream Hollywood films, where animals, that kind of cutification, animals are made cute, right? Every animal is cute, whether it's a lion or a snake or anything. That kind of Disneyfication is not what the Vyams are doing. They are in fact de-anthropomorphizing in their imaging. Unfamiliar and unused to canvas and paper as media, Gond artists borrow from the motifs and patterns that they use on their floor and walls as murals. The unpaneled spread is created using the geometries of the digna, widely seen in their wall art. The Bhitti Chitra, Bhitti meaning wall, and picture, which is Chitra, so wall art, painted with locally sourced organic colors like charcoal, limestone, and flower dyes. This and the drawings, rich in intricate pastoral imagery, keep intact the indigenous aesthetic that the Vyams sought to maintain. The anthropomorphized figures are common to their pantheistic mythology, and these find a resonant visuality in the narrative art. The Vyams maintain that the Pardhan Gond pictographic tradition, using the fine intricacies of linear limning and teaming stipple work, that's called limning and stipple work, incorporating grass. They actually use grass, they use mustard seeds and all these things, grain patterns in their work, which allows for an evocative alternation between dense and sparse spaces that hold the text and the image. Okay, so then again, as I was telling you, the gutter space is not there, or at least not traditionally the traditional gutter space. Vyam art de-anthropomorphizes, and according to Nandini, it is the tribal art with its animistic excess and fluidity that creates a mytho-epic universe. For instance, the road takes on a serpentine pattern, moving in coiled loops in between spaces interspersed with trees, grass, animals grazing, etc. This kind of animistic excess and fluidity of morphing forms tells us something about the nature of the imagination of the Gondi artwork, in contrast to the fixated imagination defining the Vedic cosmos, the Hindu cosmos. The denial of frames means that the reader can find no obvious position to which to view the historical event. Events in history with images and text bleeding onto page borders are only viewed in terms of how much space they occupy in our visual and therefore perceptual field. When they occupy the entire visual perceptual field, as in bleeding pages and images, this symbolizes the impossibility of limiting our view of events, of containing the past, which takes up all available space. If as classic trauma theory proposes trauma has an endless impact on life, then the stories, by representing memories of events bleeding out of frames and onto the pages, suggest the illimitable and continuing impact of those events. So it sort of performs that task. Tribals have an intense sense of shapes and geometry and an acute feel for the texture of the materials that they use to make things. In whatever they build or make, they reveal and highlight the shapes, tones, and textures they handle. Okay, so as I was telling you, that every tribal artist has a unique sort of artistic signature. So that's what I'm talking about here. All right, I'll move to the next slide. Do I have a little more time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's like 5 more minutes.
Okay. Okay. So the Bhimine reworks Gond art to illustrate an equally ancient tradition of injustice perpetuated through untouchability. That because it's a story of Ambedkar. This is emphasized in distinctive use of certain natural motifs, shading schemes, classic images of wheels and dials, punctured by pointed human limbs to expose the reality of casteist violence. The font appears to be relaxed and an unornamental script, exemplifying the simplicity of the vernacular. Okay. Okay, this is again, I want you to see this. This is again artwork from the novel, from the Bhimine. Then, okay.
There's 2 slides are missing. Oh gosh. Okay, how sad. Okay, the remaining bit that I wanted to talk about is that, you know, there was a study in Australia. I'll just tell you about the study first, that because of course the treatment of the Aborigines in Australia, rich visual parallels between indigenous artworks and microscopic natural structures hidden in the world revealed unexpected and intriguing similarities. The microscopic images, known as micrographs, were captured on transmission electron microscopes, which create enlarged projections of thin sample size and reveal flat top-down image similar to many of the artworks. So under the microscope, the sort of dot, and, you know, they look like artwork. You know, I mean, these are microscopic images that the images have disappeared. I don't know why the 2 slides are blank. I have no idea. I don't know if it's there on mine. It's so strange.
Then in the PowerPoint that you can share with students.
Yeah, I can send it to you. Yeah, I can send it to you later. Yeah, here, I have it here. I mean, I wish you could see it. These are the, you know, these are the images. So you can see this under the microscope.
You will see this. Yeah, like that.
So this is under the microscope. It's so similar to Gond art. You can show it around. Yeah, you can show it around.
Yeah, it looks like looking under a microscope, right?
Yeah, this is under the microscope. Thank you. So the art scholar, Orogita Das, says Gond is very similar to Aboriginal art because the Aborigines have their own stories like we do about creation, and they too make dashes and dots. Aboriginal art, and again, there's such a similarity between Australian Aboriginal art, Indian Adivasi art, in America, the First Nations, the kind of art that's there. Yeah, it's so similar. I mean, it's sort of uncannily similar. Aboriginal art and Gond art have their connection because we are originally from the same continent of Gondwana when they were just 2 continents, Gondwana and Laurasia. India and Australia came from Gondwana and America came from Laurasia. The performances, dances, and rituals, as well as the drinks that they serve, is like ours. There's such a similarity. That's what I'm saying. It's uncanny. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry again. That image is missing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to finish by saying that. So I wanted to talk about, the idea of the Anthropocene and how sustainability and the kind of debates that are going on today. Perhaps there's a lesson that's already existing, in certain cultures, in certain practices that we shun, that we deem as primitive, as savage, as in need of mainstreaming, in need of bringing to culture, that there are certain ways that we sort of create a kind of hierarchy between us and them, between what is available through education, culture, etc., and that which lies outside at the extremes of it. So so what I'm saying is, I'll just end with that. This is Alexa Wyke von Mosner, in her work on the Anthropocene, talks about how the telling of our times needs a different kind of storying, as in a different kind of storytelling. For storytelling, in fact, serves evolutionary purposes. And given that over thousands of years, humans have transformed their experiences, hopes, and fears into stories, it seems worthwhile to look closely at some of the ways in which we currently tell each other stories about global environmental change and human agency in the Anthropocene. This, then, is the pause that a developmentalist model needs to consciously make way for it to allow other imaginations and their stories to come forth, while cautiously, and this is what I'll end with, while cautiously keeping in mind that an easy romanticization of the primitive and the Adivasi tribal cultures can result in a flattening and a bland acceptance. It is important we expand our critical understandings and move past a rejection of other, older, different cultural models. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's see what the students online. Thank you very much. Let's see if they have questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's see. All right. Okay. Let's just stop. Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. Very good. So for those students online, are you familiar with the tribes in India? And also for those of you here, were you familiar with any of the well, even the caste system? Were you familiar with the caste system?
That's okay, Shiana. In India also, there'd be many who wouldn't know about it. I mean,
really?
Yeah, because it's something that's just kept out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
right?
it comes from that kind of unwillingness to engage, to know more, to learn more.
Mm-hmm. In a way, the ethnocentrism, questions, comments? Omar, any question? Manuel, no, Juan? Questions? I mean, I know you didn't have time to actually read it because I just sent it a few days ago.
Yeah. You just look at the artwork. It's just beautiful. It's just really beautiful. And also read about the story of Ambedkar and caste. It's a difficult story to read, but it's something that
really interesting that they don't want to box the art.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
It's a way of thinking
very differently, yeah. Because they're not trained into that kind of storytelling. This is something that they do more naturally.
And I think that also living in nature.
Yeah, true, absolutely. Yes. There's no room. Yeah, there are no rooms, there's no canvas. Yeah. True.
Yeah, that's very good. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to introduce also with the science and the STEM, the humanity point of view, right? To rethink, to learn and to unlearn, right? Learn and unlearn about different worldviews, different cosmologies, different narratives that are not necessarily influenced by Euro-American or Indian or the mainstream culture, right? There's something interesting that I think is a pattern. Actually, if you look at different tribes, because I'm also doing research. You mentioned Joe Sacco. Are you familiar with Joe Sacco? He's one of the best comic reporters alive. Actually, he's written about the conflict in Palestine and Gaza and many different conflicts, right? So I'm actually doing research myself on the Din. The Din is the indigenous, it used to be nomadic peoples in Northwest Territories of Canada, which are the subarctic, which of course have been, as you mentioned here, like the uncivilized, right? Usually not colonized until later because their lands were not fitted for agriculture. However, interesting as another relation, all these indigenous remote areas are home to the fossil fuel. You look at the fracking system, and this is also the narrative of sustainability, not just about these more sustainable cultures, but how we are all related. Because for fossil fuel economies to have our way of life, what we extract from the earth, that first of all is polluting somebody, and second, there is a waste out of the fracking and the mining. There is arsenic. You know what the arsenic is? One of the most poisonous things. So that's what they do. They bury the arsenic. So it's like the same thing, like we consume plastic, but we don't think, where does this plastic go? Why? We don't see it in our houses. It goes to India, to places where people make just $5 a month collecting plastic, right? So I think the importance of this narrative is not that we learn also, and we are learned, but it makes us rethink that we're all interconnected, right? And for us to have this way of life somehow is polluting and somehow is other cultures. So, and it's interesting because you can be talking about India, you can be talking about Northern Territories in Canada, and it's the same pattern. Also, you mentioned something about oral cultures, because when we look about narratives, what it comes into our mind is written narratives. That is also Eurocentric. Narratives are not necessarily written. And I think one of the biggest lessons for sustainability is that this lesson from these oral cultures, the land does not belong to us. We belong to our culture, to the land, sorry, which is completely different from the way that Judeo-Christian in terms of other religions, right, or cosmologies. And the land is not for us to conquer, right? Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that. How are you going to sell your mom? How are you going to sell your father? Like, if you understand the environment as in symbiotic with yourself, of course, right? So it's so interesting, no? Also, the oral traditions. We need to think about all that. And so, I don't know, I just have one question. When you talk about this with your students, are you able to reflect about the caste system?
Oh yes, all the time.
Yeah.
Caste, I mean, caste is even more pernicious than class. Caste, I mean, just think about it, the idea of untouchability, that you can't enter the room, you cannot drink water, you cannot talk, your shadow cannot fall. Oof. I mean, yeah, it's a different order of violence.
Yeah. Do you understand what she's saying? I mean, do you understand what she was talking about, the untouchables? The untouchables are the lowest of the lowest, right? And this is not racism with other ethnic groups. It's racism within your own ethnic group. And the fact that you have to throw. Like, that was shock, you know, when I saw, like, because here you look at people badly and you give them something, no? But you don't throw them. You know, I don't know.
It's more pernicious than racism as well. It's worse than racism.
Yeah, I guess.
But about caste system, because I'm very curious about something, because there are Indian people that go abroad to study, and I mean, when they go abroad, nobody cares about caste outside India, I mean, but it's not like very shocking when they stay outside and maybe they make some friends from maybe from India, and then they come back to India and they cannot be friends because they are different castes.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, like
that happens. Yes, of course it happens. So, you know, for instance, when I teach this particular text to my class, these are students who come from very privileged backgrounds. And so in India, we have a system of affirmative action like they have in the US. We have reservation for students who come from, these sections. And so for students of, this kind of background, there is a lowering of the marks to get into the university. And there's a lot of resentment where upper caste students are concerned with, this kind of reservation. And so they come into class, and one of the things that we talk about is this idea of reservation. And many of my students who come from very elite backgrounds, they say, oh, but caste doesn't exist now. It existed, sort of 100 years ago, 50 years ago, not even 100, okay, 50 years ago, or it might still exist in maybe the villages, but in the city, it doesn't exist. I never asked my friend what her caste is. I never asked my professor what her caste is. I never asked my neighbors what their caste is. So then it's important for us to make them understand that that comes from what is called caste blindness. What is caste blindness is that, I give them the example of a step ladder, that the upper caste have, by virtue of generations of being allowed everywhere, access to education, access to space, access to clothes, whatever clothes they want to wear, those are the steps that have allowed them to climb up. After they've climbed up, they don't need the ladder anymore. So they kick the ladder away, as against the students from Dalit communities who need the ladder because the ladder has always been denied to them. it's a kind of cognitive damage. Gayatri Spivak talks about cognitive damage, because these are communities who were never allowed intellectual labor. The only labor that was allowed to them was scavenging, human scavenging, that kind of division of labor. They were never allowed to be, to go to universities, to study, etc. So then when students from privileged backgrounds with the social capital that they come, when they turn around and say, oh, but caste doesn't happen, then it's because they're caste blind, because they've already got all the privileges that they could get from their caste. So now it's very easy to turn around and say, no, but I never asked my friends their caste, I never asked my professors their caste. Of course you don't ask them their caste, because it doesn't matter to you, because you've already got the benefits of caste by being upper caste. So that's another, thing.
I guess that can also reflect to white privilege.
White privilege, yeah.
Or also male privilege in a patriarchal society. The fact that when you are in a privileged position, you take for granted.
Yeah. And because you've already got the benefits of that position as a man or as a white person, you've already got all the advantages that you have because of race or gender. And then it doesn't matter. I don't think I'm a man. I don't think I'm a white person. Why don't you think it? Because you've already got all the advantages of being white or being a man.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. I don't know, students online, you want to make any questions? Mohammed, Abdul, I don't know how to pronounce your name well. Yeah, Abdullah. Any questions? Any comments before we go?
Yo no tengo question.
Tú no tienes questions. Okay, but are you aware, for example, that's he answered half in Spanish, half in English. Have you followed? Are you aware of how through this graphic narrative we're talking about sustainability, but at the same time the caste system in India? Have you followed that? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. And Mohammed, any questions? Everything okay? No question. No question. Let's see if that one gets frozen again. Okay. Well, Rina, thank you so much. I think it's been very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing and for teaching us, right, about that particular situation in India, and to learn more about your culture. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
A big applause. Thank you.
I know it's very late for all of you. Thank you for staying.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Maybe we can take a picture with us.
Yeah. We're going to, okay, so, let's take a picture so you are in the background, okay?
And maybe these students can...
Yeah, we're gonna go. I'm just going to stop recording though.